All right, let's talk about AI, because what's happening right now isn't just about a new piece of tech. It's much, much bigger than that. AI is forcing us to fundamentally reevaluate, well, everything. What we value, what power even looks like, and maybe most importantly, who gets to tell the story of our future. Let's dive in.
And this idea right here, this is the key that unlocks the whole thing. Just think about it for a second. When an AI can flawlessly check every single piece of data, the human job completely changes. It's not about finding the information anymore, it's about deciding what that information actually means.
So our guide for this entire discussion comes from some really sharp analysis in Willem Schieper's Sunny Side Up newsletter. It does a fantastic job of connecting all these dots that, on the surface, might seem totally separate.
Here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at how AI is flipping our jobs upside down. Then, we'll see how that same logic scales up to reshape global power. Third, we'll check out how the market is actually reacting to all this uncertainty. And finally, we'll get to the ultimate shift, the one that changes what we value most.
Okay, let's kick things off with the first big shift, the one that's hitting closest to home for so many of us: how we work. We're moving away from just producing things to interpreting them.
For decades, so much of professional work was about one thing: being correct. But what happens when an AI can check 100% of the data perfectly in an instant? The question, is it right? It kind of loses its value. Suddenly, the only question that really matters is, okay, what does all of this mean for the business?
And listen, this is not some far-off sci-fi concept. EY is already gearing up to conduct 160,000 audits a year using what they call agentic AI. These are systems that can pretty much act on their own to get complex jobs done. So this isn't about getting a new tool, it's a complete redesign of an entire profession, from doing the manual grunt work to governing the automated system.
And just think about the ripple effects of that. All those traditional entry-level jobs, collecting data, running checks, writing basic reports, they're starting to vanish. This completely changes the classic career ladder. Your value isn't in doing the work anymore, it's in being able to manage and govern the systems that do it for you. And you know what? This exact same pattern isn't just happening in the office. It is playing out right now in our schools and universities.
It creates something we can call the output paradox. We're living in an age where anyone can produce a polished, well-written essay in seconds. Yet, our grading systems often still reward the volume and the polish, as if that stuff is still hard to produce. So a student who doesn't use AI might actually get a lower grade, not because they know less, but because they're being measured by an outdated metric.
It really all boils down to this. For the longest time, we were a human in the loop, a necessary part of the machine. Now our role is shifting to being a human on the loop, the strategist, the questioner, the person who governs the whole system from above.
So that's what's happening to our jobs. But what happens when you take that same logic, that shift from doing to overseeing, and you blow it up to a global scale? Well, that's exactly where we're going next.
And that leads us right into our second huge reevaluation: how critical technology is moving out of the business section and onto the front lines of geopolitics.
We're seeing the rise of what you could call infrastructural technology. This is when something like a tiny semiconductor chip stops being just another product you can buy. It becomes as critical to a nation's power and security as its highways or its electrical grid. It's foundational.
And that is why something like the U.S. Match Act is such a massive deal. On the surface, yeah, it's an export rule for a chip company, but in reality, it's a full-on geopolitical chess move. The free market is taking a back seat to a controlled battlefield where whoever has access to these chips has a serious advantage in shaping the future.
This quote just nails it. The semiconductor industry isn't a market anymore. It's an instrument of power. And suddenly, things that might have seemed a little weird before, like the Dutch royal family paying a visit to Donald Trump, they start to make a whole lot of sense. These aren't just polite social calls. They are high-stakes moves to make sure your country doesn't get left behind in this new power game.
So our jobs are in flux, global power dynamics are shifting. You have to wonder, right? Where is all the smart money going? And that brings us to our third shift, this fascinating move away from unpredictable hype and towards good old-fashioned certainty.
With all the buzz around AI, you'd think every single investor would be pouring their money into the next big tech thing. But if you look a little closer, there's a really powerful countertrend happening right under our noses.
Believe it or not, investors are running towards what you might call boring industries. We're talking about companies that lay cables, provide security for construction sites, or manage traffic. Why? It's simple. Their business models are predictable, and they have almost zero risk of being completely disrupted by AI overnight. In a world full of uncertainty, predictability is the new gold.
And this caution we're seeing in the market, it points to a massive mistake a lot of people are making with AI right now. As this quote puts it so perfectly, we're confusing the incredible speed of AI's progress with actual maturity. And those are two very different things.
And this is where it gets a little uncomfortable, because there's a powerful and frankly kind of scary parallel here to the 2008 financial crisis. Back then, we jumped headfirst into complex financial systems that grew way faster than our ability to understand the risks. Today, a lot of organizations are rushing to implement AI simply because they can, not because they fully grasp the consequences.
Okay, so we've seen how this great reevaluation is changing our work, global politics, and even where we invest our money. But all of these reactions are really just stories we tell ourselves to deal with all this change. And that leads us to the final, and I think the most profound reevaluation of all. Who actually gets to control the main story?
And to really get this final piece of the puzzle, we have to go way, way back, almost 1,000 years, in fact, to a story that was told not in computer code, but in thread.
You're looking at the Bayeux Tapestry. It shows the Norman conquest of England in 1066. But here's the thing. It's not an objective historical record. It's brilliant propaganda, telling the story entirely from the victor's point of view. And it teaches us a timeless lesson. In an age with an abundance of facts and data, the ultimate power doesn't belong to the person who creates the data. It belongs to the person who weaves that data into the most compelling story.
And so, as AI starts churning out an endless ocean of information, of facts, of analysis, the most vital human skill left is storytelling. The final question we're all facing isn't about what the AI can do for us. It's about who will shape what it all means. Who gets to be the narrator? That, right there, is the great reevaluation.